Your job is to make that company profitable. Sales are not profits.
Yeah.
Growing sales doesn't mean you're profitable. It doesn't matter how big you are, make sure you're profitable where you are.
Well, hey there, and welcome on into the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I'm your host, Sam Hind, and I'm so glad that you chose to join me in this episode today. This podcast is all about empowering you and giving you the tools to grow an incredible business that changes lives every single day. The direct selling industry is a powerful one that gives people opportunities where they otherwise wouldn't have them. But most importantly, it's filled with some incredibly inspirational people. Today, I got to interview one of those people. Today, I interviewed Rudy Revak, the founder of Xyngular. And man, does this guy have a story to tell. Rudy is one of those people who I think you could listen to for hours, and he shares his story from how he came to the US, a child of refugees, how he made a life for himself, but he also talks really openly about the challenges he experienced along the way. I left this episode inspired myself. I know that you will too. And most importantly, he shares some of his amazing knowledge and findings to help inspire other people to grow successful businesses in this space. He's as passionate about this industry as I am, and I know you're going to absolutely love this episode and love the stories that he has to share. Make sure, of course, you listen in for those gold nuggets because he drops a load along the way. So have your pen and paper ready. But sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation. Well, welcome back to the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast, and welcome on in, Rudy. It is so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, look, Rudy, the pleasure is mine, and I'm excited to have you share your story. I've had the pleasure of hearing a little bit about, how you got started in the industry already, but I am excited to hear a little bit more from you today. And I know our listeners are going to love this story because I feel like you and I have got a little bit in common with some of the things that we got started doing. So, but before we get started with all of that, Rudy, can you share a fun fact about you with our listeners?
A fun fact? Oh.
A fun fact.
I don't know. I think a lot of people find it interesting that still at my age, I race a stock car quite frequently.
Really?
Yeah. I still race in the Trans Am series in the USA. I don't do as much of it as I used to when I was younger, but I still am active. I do 6-8 races a year.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And if I were a rev head, I'd probably start asking you things like what sort of car, but you could tell me that and I would have no idea what you meant. So. Rudy, I'm really looking forward to hearing, like I said, a little bit about your story again. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your journey into the direct selling world? I mean, you are obviously the founder and chairman of the board for Xyngular, but you have been with a number of direct selling companies over the years, and your entry into this industry was quite an interesting story.
Okay, how far back would you like me to go?
Hey, let's go back to the start, and we can play around from there.
All right, I'll try to condense the first part of it, but
we could be here for a while, but that's okay. I don't mind. It's a great story. So I want to know how you got into this industry. Where did it all start from?
All right. In order to describe that, I have to go back a little further than just the industry into my upraising, because I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Germany. My mom and dad are Hungarian and Romanian refugees who escaped after the war to get away from the communists. And then they were in a refugee camp in southern Germany, and that's where I was born, as a refugee. When we were 5 years old, we came to the United States for the American dream, as they say. And then I spent most of my young life being raised on a chicken farm. We had 26,000 chickens. And so I grew up knowing how to work. And that's one of the advantages of being a farmer. And even in today's world, you look around in our business, our industry, and you see a lot of farm people who do well in our business. And I think one of the reasons is because they know how to work.
Yep.
And so when I got out of school, I didn't have many opportunities. When I got out of school, I went to work in a retail store. I didn't have the desire nor the money to go on to college at that point. And then I wound up spending 3 years in the United States Army. And when I came home from Vietnam, they said under the GI Bill, I could go to college and they would help pay for it. And they were willing to give me $271 a month to go sit in school. And I was good at sitting and I needed the money. So I decided to go to college full time, and I was still had to work full time because I had no money. So I was working in a retail store and going to college full time. And I did that for about, I don't know, I was in my second year, I think. And one day I came home from work and the telephone was ringing, and it was a total stranger who was just calling people out of the telephone book, just dialing numbers. And I don't know if you can see my fingers, but I'm dialing. And back in those days, it was literally dialing.
Yeah, I do remember this.
This was 1970. And I picked up the phone. Again, it was a total stranger. And he said, "Hi, would you like to make some more money?" I said, "Don't hang up." I said, "I'm interested." And he went on to invite me to a business presentation. He wouldn't tell me anything about it, of course. He just invited me to a presentation. I had to go 60 miles round trip to get to this business presentation. And I did. I went. When I went in there were a lot of nice people there, everybody wearing suits, looking good, people shaking hands, everybody happy. I sat down. I remember I'm only a 23-year-old kid at this point. Okay. And the first thing, a guy goes up to the front of the room, and I don't know, there were 100 people in the room. A guy goes to the front of the room, and the first thing he did on the top of the board, he writes in big letters, about a third of the board, $30,000, right at the top of the board. That's how he started the presentation. And I saw that. Now, this is 1970. $30,000 in 1970 was like $300,000 today. I mean, it was a lot of money. To me, it was fortune. And then he went on to explain the business. And he went on to draw circles and squares and discounts and percentages and incomes. And the truth is, I didn't understand any of it. But I stayed focused on that $30,000. And I said to myself, "Self, if they can teach you how to make that 30 grand, don't worry about it. You can figure out the rest." And so I got started as soon as I could. And I say as soon as I could because that first company I joined cost $3,217. And again, in today's dollars, back when I joined, and I think $3,200, you could buy a new Ford. So what would a new Ford cost today? $40,000. So that's like.
So this is, like a lot of money to start a direct selling business. Or an MLM business back then. I mean, this is sort of unheard of now that you need to spend this sort of money to get into a business in this industry now.
Right. And Sam, in today's world, people say, "Oh, well, that must have been one of those pyramid companies. They were just trying to get your money." Well, people don't understand now. You have to look back into those days. There was no UPS. There was no Amazon. There was no FedEx. There was no, you couldn't call up and get products tomorrow. So we became, by making that investment, what they called a direct distributor.
Yes.
So it's like I had my own little warehouse in my home, and I recruited people who came to me, bought the products, and they went out and sold them. So I became a little local warehouse. And I didn't have any money, of course. And I went home that night. I was still living at home. I just, as I said, gotten home from the Army a year before. And my dad asked me where I'd been, and I was all excited. I mean, they had me excited. And so I started drawing some circles on a napkin in the kitchen table and showing my dad.
Repeating all the figures that you didn't understand.
Exactly. I didn't understand it, but I had enough in my mind. And Sam, you know what my dad said to me? My dad was a very hardworking, good man. Excellent. My mom and dad, I was very fortunate. But my dad said to me, "Look, Rudy, those people are trying to show you how to work smart and not just hard for the rest of your life." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Yeah, Dad, but it costs $3,217. There's no way I can get that money." And so it kind of went by the wayside. About 10 days later, my dad came to me with a check for $3,217. He had put up the house and the farm to borrow that money. Goodness. They had no money. They were having trouble paying the feed bills. And he went and borrowed that money for me. And that makes me emotional to this day because he said, look, here, I want to give you the chance I never had. Now, thank God he knew I was a hard worker. I was willing to work and so on. And so I got started. And the funny part was by then, it was 10 days later, I didn't even have the information anymore. Who do I call? And finally, I found the guy who invited me, the stranger. I call him up. He takes my check. I've never seen him again since that day.
Wow.
No, but thank God in those days, there were areas to go to. There were meetings to go to. There were a lot of good people. And I had a lot of good mentors. So I got started in the business. I got a basement full of soap, literally a basement full of soap.
So hang on, we're talking soap, like wash your hands soap here. This is the business
all-purpose cleaner, laundry detergent, car wash,
oh my
furniture.
Goodness. Okay.
I mean, you name it, all kinds of soap. And it literally filled the basement because, $3,000 in today's dollars, again, that's like $30,000. Just think how much soap you get for $30,000.
That's a lot of soap.
Yeah. And when my dad saw that, he had a little bit of doubt.
Yeah.
And I went to work very hard at it. I started, of course, I was still working full-time. I was going to school full-time, and I'd go to those meetings twice a week. And for the first 9 months, I did awful. I mean, I tried, and I just had no success. I sold a little product, and I made a few dollars, but it wasn't working. And I recruited a few people, but they quit as soon as they found out what I was like. So I didn't do very well. But fortunately, my background is German. And if you know anything about Germans, there's one trait they have that most of the world doesn't, and that's a thick skull, hard head, right? And so I don't quit very easily. And I wouldn't give up because I kept saying to myself, look, if these people can make it that I'm watching doing a training and so on, then darn it, sooner or later, so can I. And I hung in there, and I had a lot of good mentors and trainers. I was so fortunate, Sam. Guys like Marty Day, Joe Cotronio, names you would know, Bill Bailey. But one that you would know who became very close, that was Jim Rohn.
Yeah.
I came up under Jim when he was just Jim. He wasn't Jim Rohn. Nobody knew about him back then except our company. He was part of that business in those days. And oh my God, I listened to from the minute he went to the front of the room the first time and he poured into me, everything he said, I just soaked up. And to this day, one of the major things that he got into my mind, it'll never change. And that is, for things to change, you have to change. And for things to get better, you have to get better. And that stuck with me. And I listened to every word he had, and I did everything he asked. And sooner or later, it took a while, but things changed. And then once they changed, I started to build my business. Things were getting great. Back in those days, we didn't have any multi-level system. So usually in that system we were in, what you did was when you became successful, they would move you up to a new level called area coordinator. And so you did the trainings and the meetings. I think you identify with that where you come from, probably.
Yeah.
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 And
so Rudy, what do you think? You were just saying that the one of the biggest things that you had to change, of course, was you in order to be successful. Now, we know, of course, that you've been very successful in this industry to this day, and you have not just founded several direct selling companies, but have successfully run several direct selling companies and helped, thousands and thousands of people change their lives. But what for you was the catalyst, the thing that you had, maybe the one or two things that you had to shift within yourself in order to go from that first unsuccessful 9 months to starting to see growth in your business?
Sam, it's hard to say just one or two because there were couple more than that. But what I really got focused on, and if I look back and I say, what was it that Jim changed in me? What was it that got through to me? One was I was a 23-year-old kid. So I couldn't look into the future and say, man, here's where I want to be and here's where I go. Yes, I had dreams, of course, but did I really believe in them? Probably not. I needed to believe in myself. I was a chicken farmer. I had no big education, no background. I'm a 23-year-old kid. It's pretty hard to believe in yourself when you come from that kind of a background. And I'd go to the meetings and I'd go to trainings and they'd say, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And in the room, I'd say, you can't. Yes, I can. And then I'd go out and talk to 3 people and they'd say no, and my attitude went to pot.
Yeah.
So that believability, then once that happened, then I started to get a better attitude. And once I fixed my attitude, and now going to work was never a problem for me. I was always willing to do that. The biggest problem I had in those days was not just going to work and doing something, but being consistent at it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happened, as I said, was I'd go and talk to a couple of people, get no's, and you know what that feels like.
Yeah.
And my attitude would go down. I'd stop talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So one of the things that one of my good mentors, his name was Marty Day, taught me and convinced me of was that it's not the hard work. It's the consistent effort. It's activity that you do. Don't worry about the result. Worry about your activity. And if you get in it and have enough activity, the results will come. And I can tell you a little story how that changed. Because I don't know if you heard that. I said in the first 9 months I didn't do well, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a true story. One day, this fellow, Marty Day, he was my area coordinator where I was in central New Jersey. And he was kind enough he had breakfast with me. He said, Rudy, why aren't you doing better? Because he knew I was trying, I was working hard. Why aren't you doing better? And I had this big list of reasons. Well, I'm only 23. None of my friends have $3,200. I live 60 miles away to go to meetings. I'm going to school during the day. I'm working during the day. I had this whole list. Yeah. And he was smart. He said to me, Rudy, he said, you know what's wrong with your list? I said, what? He said, your name's not on it. So what do you mean? He said, well, those problems that you're telling me about, everybody has those same problems. Oh, they might be a little different, but have problems. The problem's not that. It's you. You got to change you. And what do you mean I got to change me? He reached into his briefcase and he took out 10 paper clips and he gave them to me. And he said, Rudy, I'll put these 10 paper clips. First of all, he said, will you do, if I promise you you'll be successful, if you do what I ask, will you do it? I said, Marty, I'll do anything. He said, put these paper clips in your left pocket. I put them in. He said, now I want you to go out every single day and talk to 10 people about your product, your opportunity, your business. I don't even care what you say. I want you to talk. And every time you talk to a person, you get to move that paperclip from your left pocket to your right pocket. And I want you to promise me that every day for the next 30 days, you will move those paperclips. Now, you can't do 9 one day and 11 the next. That doesn't count. 10 every single. I said, Marty, I'll do it. So I went out and I didn't use paper clips because when I took them out of my pocket, they would catch the end of my pants and they were tearing my pants. So I started using pennies. I put 10 pennies in my pocket every morning. And during the day, I made sure I was talking to people. Hi, would you, I got this great opportunity and I'm new in the area. I'm looking for some people who would be in. Oh, no, I'm not interested. Great, thank you. And I just moved my penny.
I love that.
And what it did for me, looking back on it, is all of a sudden I didn't get discouraged with no's because my goal wasn't a yes.
Yeah.
Before that, my goal was to get a yes, right? To sell a product, to have somebody come to a meeting, to join the business. Now my goal was just talking to people. And as I did that
so much.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it's we've talked about this actually on this podcast before. We had the awesome Andrea Waltz who wrote the book Go for No, which was all about, the concept of it's a numbers game. You've got to chase the no's in order to get the yeses. And, the story I often tell from my experience, Rudy, and, you and I have talked about this, certainly the no's are something you've got to get used to in this industry. But I started with door-to-door sales with the duffel bag over my shoulder. And I was taught every no is one step closer to a yes. But I love the penny concept because I think it simplifies things so much and it's still so relevant today. Just the conversations. And, I don't know how many women we got that walk around with pockets. But, I feel like this is a really, I think I could do that. I could do the pennies in the pocket thing. I think that's a great idea.
Sure. Well, it made it simple for me.
It is really simple. I love that.
Right? And because I didn't care about yeses and nos, that's what made the difference. Because it kept my attitude up.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. If somebody said no to me, well, I looked like I lost my dog. So the next person I talked to, they said no because I looked like I lost my dog.
Yeah.
So
Rudy, one of the things that really stands out to me about what you've said, of course, is the determination that you had because of the investment that you made. And the investment that you made was, it was a lot of money for back then. But if you were to put that into context now, that would be like spending, say, 30 to 50 grand on a business now, which is unheard of in this industry. It just wouldn't happen. In fact, for a lot of companies, they do free, periods of free joining where it costs absolutely nothing. And you certainly don't have to hold on to stock. I've got to wonder, do you think that the reason that a lot of people don't stick at their business and push through, and I can imagine a lot of people, if they had a first 9 months like what you did in this business, that they would simply give up because they haven't made that same sort of investment. Do you think that there's a difference between the way that people treat their businesses in this industry now versus the way that you treated yours back then, simply because of that investment difference?
I think there's a big difference there. It would have been easy for me if I'd have only bought one bottle of soap. And then when everybody said no to me and I had to drive back and forth to go to meeting, I might have quit. I might have just given up, but I couldn't give up. I was committed. So it's in everything in life. If you're not committed, it's easy to let it go by the wayside.
So what do you think is the key and the difference between people who are successful in this industry now compared to those who are not? Because I think things have changed so much and we've got a very different landscape that we're operating these businesses in. But you've got those, maybe that top 5 to 10% of people that just absolutely take this business and run with it and become super, super successful. And then you've got the people that sort of sit there and look at those people and say, what's different about that person and me? I think a lot of people put it down to that person's just better than I am, but you and I know better than that. I'd love to know what you think is the difference between those top performers.
I would boil it down to one thing. They're hungry.
Yeah.
If you're not hungry, if you don't have big goals and you don't need it, you don't want it bad enough. It isn't just our industry. It's anything. It's anything. As I said, my hobby is racing. I mean, if you're not, my son, I tried to get him into racing when he was young. I was hoping he would go on and maybe make it a profession, but he didn't. He'd rather go to the mall with his buddies on Friday afternoon or evening while I was at the racetrack practicing. He didn't have the hunger. He didn't have it, the burning desire to make it. And so when I say, if I would have bought one bottle, I might have quit. Not if I would have stayed involved. And I think that's the key many times to people. What makes the difference? It's not can they do it or can't they do it. If they stay involved long enough to learn how to do it. I was fortunate. I went to those meetings. I went to the trainings. Every time I went, I got positive. I'd go out onto the field, and what would happen? Trying to talk to people, you get no's, you get discouraged, you get down, and then you go back into that battery charger. And in today's world, it's even easier to get in the battery charger. We got podcasts like yours. We have trainings on Zoom. We get three-way calls going. We get all of that happening. So I think that's a huge part of it.
And Rudy, one of the things that really stands out to me about your story as well are the incredible mentors you had right from that early stage. And you did talk about, you had to go to those meetings, you had to actively pursue that. But, in this day and age, what tip would you give someone around finding an appropriate mentor and someone to keep you accountable so that they can also see, success like what you saw because you had, Marty and Jim, not Jim Rohn, just Jim back then. Right. I love it. But those people, it sounds like they really did shape you in a way and mentor you in those early days. How can people find an appropriate mentor now? And should they? Is it still something that people should be doing to be successful? 100%.
If I was going to get into the car industry, what would I do? I would go find somebody who knew about how to sell cars and listen to them. And so it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're a nurse or a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer or a factory worker or a truck driver, you don't know this industry. And the way to learn this industry is to get around the people who do know the industry, who are successful. How do you do that? In my opinion, by showing up.
Mm-hmm.
When's the next Zoom call? Don't say, oh, well, I heard that last week. Oh, I was at that meeting. I was at that convention 6 months ago. I don't need to go back again. I was there one. No, you need to go back until you've reached every one of your dreams. You keep going back. And then you not only keep going back, but once you've started to reach your dreams, then you become the battery charger. Then you start holding the events. You start getting your group together and make sure they have a place to come to get their battery charged back up.
Yeah.
I think that's the key, is staying involved. I've always sold the target. Involvement equals success.
Mm-hmm.
Calls, Zoom calls, podcasts, events, meetings, trainings, sips and that's what we call like a whole meeting, sip and see, right? Just getting together gets you up. So.
Yeah, I love it. And Rudy, tell us a little bit about the start of Xyngular, because I know a lot of our listeners are Xyngular distributors. And if they're not, many people that listen to this podcast know of the company. But one of the things that fascinates me always is where companies come from, where they start, and how they got to where they are now.
Okay.
You know, we often see these big companies and we don't realize that these all started with a single person. They all started with a dream, and in many cases, amazing stories of, kitchens and basements and, and people playing around with something that they were passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us a little bit about the beginning of Xyngular
Sure.
and how that all came to be?
But Sam, in order to do that, I have to go back a little further because it's a longer story, but I'll condense it.
I love it. Go for it.
So
Let's go back. We'll wind the clock back. Right.
So as I said, once I started to become successful, I did well. And then the idea was to move up and become what they call an area coordinator. And you got an override for doing the meetings and the trainings in an area. So I moved from New Jersey, where I started, down to Baltimore because they promoted me to be area coordinator in Baltimore Mountain. And I did great. Not because I was good, but because I was excited. I'm making money. I'm making $10,000 a month. I don't know if I can say that, right? I was making a lot of money back then, and things were great. And it was just terrific. And so my next goal was to move up and become what they said regional director. And that position, then you're over, obviously, a region, maybe a state or 3 or 4 states. And I was just about ready to get promoted to become one of these regional directors. And we went to an event, a big event in Chicago. I went, and a couple of my other, what we call general distributors, they were upper level distributors, went to this event. And in that event, the company was expanding internationally. They had already opened in various places around the world, and it was doing great. And so this guy, his name was Chuck Simmons, he was the international vice president. And he says, listen, if anybody in this room wants to go international, or you speak another language, or we've got opportunity for you. Well, that's the last thing I wanted to do. I was already scheduled to move up to northern United States to become this regional director. I was excited. But Chuck Simmons comes down from the stage, and he sat right in front of us. We were in the second row. The leaders were right there in the first row. And my buddy who went with me, his name was Stan Bittner. Stan leans over and he says, hey, Chuck, send Rudy's butt to Germany. He speaks German. As a joke, right? Well, a day later after the conference, I got back to Baltimore, and every place I went, they said, hey, we got Chuck Simmons is trying to reach you. Chuck Simmons is trying to reach you. We didn't have recordings back then, So obviously there was no text messages or emails. So I call this Chuck Simmons, and he says, Rudy, we got an opportunity for you. How would you like to be an assistant vice president? Now, the deal was area coordinator, regional director. Next was assistant vice president. And there was only 6 of them in the whole world at that time. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, me? Yeah. I said, great, I'll do it, whatever you want. He said, it's in Germany. Germany. You mean I got to move to Germany? So, oh, man, that was a big deal. But I said yes. To make a long story short, they told me, hey, go to Germany, and we're going to give you 1% of all of the company's sales right off the top, plus a car, plus a house, and just go over there and take care. They told me the company was doing, I don't remember now what it was, about $500,000 a month. Yeah. Well, 1% of $500,000 a month. Plus, in those days, no matter what level you were at, you could build your own business. So even when I was area coordinator, I'm still building my own personal business. And that's where the bigger money was in. And so I'm thinking, go to Germany. Automatically, I'm sitting at 1% of $500,000. Plus, I can build my own business. Okay, I'll do it. I just got married. I pack up my new wife, the furniture, and stuff, move it to Germany. I wasn't even smart enough to go there and look at it before I went. And so I wound up in Germany. Well, there was one little thing they forgot to tell me. And that was that the fellow who was running the company, his name was Ralph at that time, had just spun off with another guy out of England. They started their own company and took all the distributors with them. So that $500,000 in sales was down to about 50,000 in sales.
Oh, no.
Yes. And so now, what do? Well, I'm over there. Nothing I can do. I start going to work and I start building myself. I just built it up myself and we did really well. Eventually, it took me a while, but we did really well with it. And then from there, that company, they moved me to Canada. I built a very successful business in Canada with that company. Then from there, they moved to Italy. I spent a couple of years in Italy. Which was great. I loved that experience there in time. Then I became something international. I don't remember what it was, but I was over. I had Italy, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Spain, Mexico, Canada. So I don't know, 6 countries. And I spent about 2 years on an airplane, literally always going. And after about 2 years of that, I said, Jerry, the fellow who owned the company, I said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go and start a new company of my own. This is now late 70s, early 80s. And my first love by then, Sam, had become nutrition.
Yeah.
Because while I was in Canada, I started to learn about nutrition for myself. Mm-hmm. And the more I learned, the more I took, the better I felt, the more I read, the more I took, And
this was before nutrition was cool, right? This was you were way ahead of your time when it came to this. We talked about this a few weeks ago.
It was 1975 and nobody believed it. You go into a doctor back then and said vitamins, but they don't take that stuff.
Yeah.
But what happened was I started believing in it so strongly that every month when we had our sales meetings, our corporate team sales meetings, I was starting to train our salespeople on what I was learning about vitamins. Because I wanted them to stay healthy. So I was sharing my information. And one day, one of the sales guys says to me, hey, Rudy, you have us taking all this. I won't use the word he used. You have us taking all this stuff. Why aren't we selling it? I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that myself? We were selling soap. And I had a friend in the United States. You may not know him personally, but he was the guy who actually later on founded Muscle Milk. You know the product Muscle Milk?
No, but it sounds like a fascinating product.
Well, it boomed here in the United States. It was a huge product. It's a protein drink, but pre-mixed protein drink. And in the United States, it's great. But anyway, he was the son of someone who owned a direct selling company, Neolife. You might know the name Neolife. Mm-hmm. And his name was Greg Pickett. And I called Greg and I said, hey, Greg, would you make me a supplement? So he put together we called it a brownie. It was 2 brown tablets and a little cellophane. It was an all-purpose multivitamin. Mm-hmm. And we introduced it in Canada, my soap business, and it took over 30% of the business overnight. And so that was great. So since that had become my first love, I went to Jerry and I said, Jerry, I don't want to do this traveling anymore. I want to come back to the States and start a new company. Now, they had several companies around the world. Altogether, we had like 100, I think close to 100 companies around the world at one point. And, so I had selected Dallas, Texas to start this new company. And the reason was because everywhere I went in the world, Sam, whether I was in Europe or South America, there was this television show on back then called Dallas. Did you ever see that?
No, but I know the show.
Oh, okay.
I love it.
So this television show, Dallas. Now, by then, unfortunately, I was divorced by then, so I'm a single guy again.
Hilarious.
This show, Dallas, has all these beautiful women, beautiful weather. It was always warm, growing. It was terrific. So I thought, okay, Dallas.
Yep.
So anyway, they said I was in Mexico in December. This is about 82. And I was doing an event. And on the way back from the event, I was going to stop in Dallas. And they had sent someone in to pick 4 office locations. And then I would select one. We were going to start this new vitamin company. Actually, we were going to call it Nutri-America back then, but that never went anywhere. And so I come to Dallas from Mexico City after this training. And when I landed in Dallas, I swear to you, Sam, on that one day that I was there, it was raining, hailing, sleeting, snowing, windy, ugly, all in one day. And I thought, where'd all that beautiful weather I saw on television go? So anyway, we selected an office. From there, I went to California to a board meeting a couple of weeks later. And at the board meeting, basically, they said to me, look, Rudy, we bought this company years ago, and it's not doing well. Instead of starting a new one, why don't you take this one over? And it was a jewelry company. I said, Jerry, I don't want to sell jewelry. That's the last thing I want to sell. I want to sell new. He said, we don't do with it what you want. We've already got millions of dollars invested in it. It's going to go under. So why don't you? Okay. California, San Jose, California. Dallas snowing and cold. San Jose, California. So I wound up in California in this jewelry company. Yeah. And we quickly turned it in from jewelry. We added skincare. From skincare, we added nutritional supplements. Mm-hmm. But even in the early days, the first nutritional supplement we introduced was, these nutrients for lustrous hair, these nutrients for radiant skin, these nutrients for strong nails, that kind of thing was the background. Mm-hmm. And we changed the marketing plan from a party plan to a stair-step breakaway type plan. And we did great. It just grew and grew. And then that was very successful. A few years later, a certain situation happened within that company and caused me to leave. And they're great people, the fellow who owned that company and still is to this day, Jerry Brassfield. But there were some other people in the company that I didn't get along with as the company got bigger and bigger internationally. And so I wound up leaving. And I started a company called Symmetry. That was 1995. And Symmetry grew. I mean, we did very well. And then now I'm getting down to how Xyngular finally came about. So that was pretty long entrance to getting to your question, right?
So one of the things that I know when you and I first spoke, and I love this because there's been so many yeses, I would say, in your career. So many times where you've had an opportunity that's presented itself and you've said yes to something that I think a lot of people potentially would have said no to, and it's led you to have, these amazing experiences. But the one thing that you did say to me, which I thought was really interesting, particularly about that jewelry company, was your concern was for the people who were growing businesses in that company, and you wanted to support them and make sure that they continued to have a home because you didn't want to see that company go under. And, I think that's one of the things that really stood out for me with you was that you are so focused on helping people have this amazing opportunity and looking after them in doing that. And that's kind of continued through a lot of the companies that you've been with and that you've worked with, is making sure that the field are looked after as well. And I really admire that, because I think that's unfortunately today something that is a real fear for a lot of distributors is, what are the people above me doing and how is that going to impact me in the long run? Do you think that's different now to what it was maybe 20, 30 years ago?
Is it different? No, because we had those same situations back then. There were some people that started companies and boom, were gone. There were companies that were pyramid companies and left. And unfortunately, basically that somewhat was what happened to me, because when I was in Germany, the U.S. company went out of business as a pyramid selling company. Now, it didn't need to, but the people who owned the company at that time, in my opinion, decided, hey, they got their money, they quit. They didn't want to fight the battle. Yeah. And they just walked away. And that's when Jerry Brassfield came in, and he bought what was left of the company He wanted guys like me. Now, he didn't know me, but they'd had all this leadership around the world, and that's what he was buying into. So we kept the company alive internationally, but US went under, and that's what devastated me. Not me personally, because I was okay, but all the friends, all the relatives, all the people that I'd gotten into business in the US that were making money. They weren't doing as well as I was, but they were happy. They were making extra money. They lost their opportunity. And that was a big blow to me. That really hurt me. So when I had my own company, Symmetry, anytime I heard of a company that wasn't doing well, whether it was little or big, I would do whatever I could to try to acquire it. Not because I cared about wanted their products or what I really wanted was to save the distributors, or at least give them an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because of what happened to me. And that's actually, Sam, how this happened, that I started Xyngular. Because a lot of people in the industry knew that I was looking, if there was a company available, I was interested. And I had a guy come into my office one day who said, "Hey, Rudy, I know this company in Florida that started, and they're doing great. They're booming, but the kid doesn't have any money. He doesn't have enough money to buy inventory, and he's looking for help." I said, "Great. What's his name? What's his number? Let's call him." Right there on my desk, I called this guy. And to make a long story short, he wouldn't sell me the company because he wouldn't give up 51%. And I would never get involved in something unless I had 51% of it, because you're already failing. Why would I want you to be in control? So
yeah, that's a good point.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And but he had this unique marketing compensation plan that I'd never seen before after all my years in the business. It was called a straight line. Do you know what that is?
No, I've got to admit I don't, but I'm keen to find out.
Well, I'll really condense it. It's basically like a unilevel, but on the back end, it has a 12% bonus that we pay out every month. And that 12% is divided up based on your personal volume to achieve a certain rank. But how much you get of that bonus is dependent on how many people joined after you. So in effect, for this bonus pool, everyone who joined the company after you is in your downline for the bonus pool purposes. And what it does is it causes everyone to work together. Because even if I'm not a big distributor, but someone else, even in another team, is booming, I'm happy. Because she joined after me, and I'm taking advantage of her success in a way in this bonus pool. That's kind of a simplified explanation of it, but that's how it works. And
so essentially, it creates community in the company.
Yes, and it's almost like the distributors own part of the company at that point, because every month we take 10, 12%, not the profits, even no matter where, that's of the sales, right? I mean, as an owner, I only get paid if there's profits. And we distribute them. They're getting paid every month from the company's success. So the more we do, the more they get. And that was a great concept to me. And so I said to this guy who brought it to me, I said, "Hey, we can't buy this one. Let's start one with that concept." Now, I couldn't be the leader of it because I had Symmetry. I was the head of Symmetry. I was president of Symmetry. I was visual. So I said, well, let's start one. And we started with a single product. And this, what we call the single line. Today we call it a straight line. We called it a single line. And that's where the name came from, believe it or not. So it shows you how creative I am, right?
I love it.
Single product, single line, singular. And we couldn't spell it with a C because there was a phone company with a C. So we spelled it with the X.
I love it. I love it. And I bet there's a lot of distributors that had no idea that's where the name came from. So I love that.
We tell that story once in a while, but yeah.
And so today, I mean, tell us a little bit about the mission and the vision of the company today, because you guys have grown substantially since that point. And obviously, you guys are global now. You've done a lot of amazing stuff. What's the mission and vision of the company today in 2024?
Well, our mission is the same as it has been from day one, and that is to enrich people's lives. Okay,
Love
through
it.
our products as well as our opportunity. And I know everybody
Yeah.
says that, but obviously that's the case here. And we are
Mm.
very distributor focused. And unfortunately, in today's world, you've heard of some of the companies recently that changed their whole marketing plan and all of a sudden overnight take away people's income.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that to me, I can't fathom that.
Yeah.
Our number one focus is our distributor field. Every single person in our company knows that the most valuable asset we have is not our products, not our office, not our company, is our distributor field.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that's the one big thing that I bring to the company, being a distributor, because I remember what it was like being that distributor and what it takes to make these things work.
Yeah.
So, and as
And
far
Rudy,
as
given
future mission, I mean, right now we're in the process of, we really want to start making international more of a focus.
yeah, awesome. So we'll be seeing a little bit more from Xyngular around the globe over
Yep.
the coming years.
Yep.
I love that. And so, Rudy, tell me, you guys have been through, some big growth surges, and I think there's always this desire for a company. We've had a lot of companies come on this podcast who are still in those very early stages, who are just new and sort of finding their way in the world. Is growth always a good thing?
Is growth a good thing? Controlled growth is a great thing,
Mm-hmm.
but excess growth is not. I think the last couple of years pointed that out to a lot of companies.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I mean, you couldn't do anything wrong. Everybody grew. Why?
Yeah.
People were home. They had nothing to do. They were easy to recruit. They were easy to sell to. So every company, boom, probably doubled in sales. As soon as it was
Yeah.
over, it went back downhill.
Yeah.
And
So
so
what's the difference between that sort of growth versus controlled growth, and how can somebody make sure that the growth that they have is controlled?
you mean a company or a distributor?
A company, initially a
Yeah.
company.
From the company's point of view, I would say to anybody, and I've said this to people who ask me for my opinion when they're starting a company, my opinion is your job is to make that company profitable.
Yeah.
Sales are not profits. Growing sales doesn't mean you're profitable. And they're one of the reasons I acquired so many companies, even ones who did good sales. We started Xyngular by acquiring another company that we merged into it initially, that was doing several $1,000,000 in sales, and they were going broke.
Yeah.
Because they weren't focused on making sure the company is profitable. And so that's the secret to success. It doesn't matter how big you are, make sure you're profitable where you are, and then grow into the future.
And do you think that this relates to distributors as well? I mean, we absolutely, from a company perspective, profit versus sales, two very different things. And we've seen lots of companies that are turning over a lot of money go under. But what about a distributor? Profit versus sales, is that still relevant for someone growing their own business within the industry?
Yes. I would put it in a little different category. And I use myself as an example because every example I have can only come what I've been through. When I first got into business, I told you I went down and became this area coordinator. I'm making about $10,000, $12,000 a month, and that was a fortune then. I mean, and by the end of that year, I was broke. Why? Buying this and buying that and spending here and going there, and I spend it all. And the negative behind that is one of the greatest things I ever learned, and it comes right out of the Bible. It says, this too will change. So when things are going really well, you've got to say to yourself, this too will change.
Yeah.
As well as when you're not doing well, you got to say, hey, look, if I hang in there, if I do it, it's going to change. But some of our distributors start making big dollars. They get to that, I don't know if I can even say number. Well, I'm not anyone particular. They get $20,000, $30,000 a month, $50,000 a month in income, and they start spending $10,000 more than they're making. Right? They used to only make $5,000 a month. Now they're making 10, and they start spending 12. So it's very difficult to keep yourself within that range, because if you're making 12, the day's going to come when that goes back down. Now you can build it back up, and then someday make it 15, and someday make it 20. But if you're spending 12 and only making 10, even though 10's more than you ever made, all of a sudden, where's your attitude? Your attitude is down. So you got to make sure that your spending never outgrows your income. in my opinion.
What about time, Rudy? I think one of the things that a lot of people in this industry don't value as being worth money is their time. And so they're looking at it going, hey, you know what? My business is making X amount of money, but they're spending huge amounts of time to earn that money. And they're not looking at that as being something of value. Do you think it's something people need to tie back and go, hang on a minute, what's my time worth? And am I making a profit on that time? Or do you think, you know what, you just pile as much time as you can into your business no matter what you earn early on and don't worry about it?
Sam, I think there's two answers to that because that's a two-edged sword. There's two sides to that time coin. One is the people who are working very hard and they put everything into their business and then they forget their God and their family. They put their religious and their family time to the side to build their business. Oh, someday I'll take care of the other two. No, they always go hand in hand, in my opinion. God, family, then your business. Okay, and there's a smart way to do that, in my opinion. But the second side of that coin is there's people who get to those levels, and because now they're doing so well, they forget that they still have to work. This is still a business. This is still, you have to put energy and effort into it every day. Sending out a couple of posts every day is not working. And so they get complacent, which is the other side of the coin that needs to be worked on. But as far as that time thing, what I found worked for me, and this is a whole time management training, but what worked for me was in those days after I learned this from the Jim Rohns and the Marty Kays, and I didn't invent this. I would take out a calendar every month and I'd say, look, here's my spiritual time. Okay, I go to church on Sundays or Saturday night, whatever that might be, and I'm going to work. I'm volunteering at the church to play bingo on this night, and I put that in. And then my family, my wife wants me to be at this event. My son wants me to be at this event. I put those things in. And then I got the whole rest of the month to work my business. But I took care of those other two first. And the things, your family loves this business. They love you doing it. They know you're doing it for them, but they want some of your time too.
So important. I think it definitely, for a lot of people, ends up being that thing that comes last, and then it becomes something that not only they, but also their family becomes resentful of. So I really appreciate that. I think that's really important to do from the start. And, one of the things that, one of my mentors told me was start the way you intend to finish. If you're not doing it when you're at the very beginning, if you're not, and it's the same with what you're talking about with spending before. If you don't have good habits with spending your money at the start when you're earning $100, when you're earning $1,000, you're certainly not going to start doing those things then. So start the way you intend to finish. And I think that's really important when it comes to your time as well. So I appreciate you sharing that, Rudy. Now, I feel like we could talk for another day here, but we are going to have to wind it up. And I've got some fun questions for you. But just really quickly, before we get to those fun questions, I've got one more thing I want to ask you about the business that we see today versus the business you started in. You've had, such an amazing career. You've had so much experience and, of course, have been mentored by some of the best people in the world, which is, of course, makes you such an amazing mentor for so many people in this industry as well. But we're living in a very different time now, and with digital tools being such a huge part of business now, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing for our industry compared to the industry that it was where you were using a phone, dialing the numbers back when you first started?
I think technology and all the things we have today, all of that is beneficial. They are all excellent. And the more that comes up, the better it's going to be. But it doesn't change our business. These are everything that we have today. The Zoom calls, the internet, the FaceTime, the social media. They are tools. And we have to remember they are nothing but tools. We are a personal business. We are a body-to-body personal business. People don't buy our business. They buy us. They buy the relationship that we build with them. Right? That's what we have to sell. So if you're using social media, fantastic. I tell people, I'll try to condense this, but when I was building my business and I ran out of a list of names, what I do, I went and I started putting ads in a newspaper. Great, I got some people off the ads in the newspaper. But you know what those people wanted to do as soon as they joined?
Put ads in the newspaper.
Hey, that's right. I said, hey, let's make you a list of names. Let's have a meeting. Oh, no, I'm just going to put ads in the newspaper like you did. Well,
yeah.
No, that doesn't work. You got to still, your list of names, let's have a meeting. And so then from there, then the next step was, if you remember, Sam, do you remember those years when those there were cassette tapes everyone was sending out, and they were called Dead Doctors Don't Lie?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And man, people were joining like crazy. So what every company do, make these tapes and start sending them out. And it worked for a few years. People actually got business from it. But then it died because you weren't building relationships. You were just sending out tapes to people.
Yeah.
And then next came the video came along, the cassette video. Remember the big square one? The first one that went out was with, who's the guy, Star Trek? Shatner.
You're asking the wrong
William
person.
Shatner and Cambridge Diet, I think it was. And then everybody started making videos with celebrities on it. I know, I was one of them that made videos and spent money on celebrities. And it worked for a couple of years, right? But then it died out because everybody was doing it and we weren't building relationships with that.
Yeah, it all comes back to the relationship, doesn't it?
And then a few years later, the internet came along. And I can remember one of the people at a DSA meeting, a head of a big company standing in front of the room saying, this industry is done. Nobody's going to buy from us anymore because they're all going to just go on the internet from now on and buy. And we can just recruit people over the internet and that's going to, no, that didn't change. Is the internet a good tool? Yes. Tapes, videos, are they good tools? Yes. Social media. And Sam, I think the same thing happened to us during the pandemic. Social media became the way to build a business. It was easy. It was simple. Everyone's joining. All of a sudden it's over. Oh no, now what? And during that time, they recruited a lot of people. But how many relationships did they build?
Yeah.
Very few. They got signups and that's it. And so,
such a good reminder, and so true. The relationship is still the most important thing. And Rudy, I just have to say, because our audience have heard me say this hundreds of times, and I did not word you up to say what you said before. So I want to come back to it because I think it's really important, because you just reinforced something that we teach, which is people are buying you, not the product, not the business. They're buying you first. And so you got to remember that. That's the bit that you need to be showing up with first. And that's why this relationship is so important. So
good for you.
I love
that. Because again, social media I love it. It's a great way to communicate but that's not going to build your business. That'll attract someone to you, but now you got to build that relationship, get back on the three-way calls, get back to doing a meeting with them, get them back on Zoom, get them back shaking hands, get them to the next event.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. And that's a good point, because events and conventions are also a really great way to introduce people to the business and the culture of the business as well. I think something a lot of people don't think to do is bring somebody along to a convention or conference that's thinking about starting a business, rather than only bringing the people who are already in it.
Sure.
Your companies are spending not only huge amounts of money, but they're putting massive amounts of expertise, and those people that become the top mentors, the people that are inspirational, that are the leaders, are the ones that they're putting on stage as well. And they're the ones that you want to be learning from, but also that you want somebody that you're bringing into the business to learn from as well. And it's a great place to get exposure to those people. So, maybe next time you've got a company convention coming up or a company conference, bring someone who's thinking about starting a business. Don't just bring the people already in there. It's a great way to use the tools the company is giving you to grow, right?
You bet. Even those new people that you've just started, bring them. Doesn't matter what level they are. They say, well, it costs money. Well, it doesn't cost $3,217. But I'll tell you what.
I know, right?
If you get in
I
there
think there's a bit of perspective shift we've got to make there.
Yeah.
This is an industry where you get to start a business in many cases for next to nothing. Where can you ever do that? I think there's a bit of a perspective shift that some of us need to make when it comes to investing in ourselves, because we don't look at it like that, do we?
Yeah. And how many of our leaders say, oh, well, I wasn't really interested in the business. I was just using the products, but I came to that convention And
Yeah.
I saw Sally at the front of the room get a check for, can't say a number, but, and man,
For whatever she got a check for.
that opened my eyes. If Sally can do it, maybe I can too.
Yeah.
That's what, man, that's what changed my life. And this industry, it hasn't changed from the day I joined 54 years ago, Sam. It's no different. Sure, we've got better tools and we've got great, times are better and it's simpler and all of that. But this is still the greatest opportunity for the average person to reach their dreams. Whatever that dream is, whether it's time freedom or work freedom, that's one thing that I'm probably over talking again. That's one thing that gets me today. People saying, oh, well, our business isn't as good because they've got all this gig economy out there. Are you kidding me? You're going to compare our business to driving an Uber? That's nothing but a job that you can decide when you're going to go to work. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are they building? They can drive 40 hours this week. Yeah, they might make some good money. Yeah, they can do it when they want. But what do they have next week from that ride? Nothing.
Yeah.
But this business, you're building something for the future. That's what makes us different. And that isn't going to go away.
Yep. Yeah, that's so true. Really good point. I love that you brought that up because it's definitely something that's come up on this podcast a lot is that fear around, what is the gig economy doing to this industry?
Nothing. Go recruit them. Next time you get in an Uber, ask the person, hey, this is great. You really love doing this? Oh, well, yeah, I do it because I got time. Well, you don't make any residual income from this. Well, what's that? What's residual income? You understand? Start a conversation with them.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I love it. Do you know, I have had the reverse happen though, mind you, where I have got into an Uber and they're using the Uber to grow their direct selling business.
Great.
Which I think could be a good idea.
Could be.
But definitely what was funny was we were actually at a company conference for a direct selling company in Australia and we had a bunch of us get in the car and it happened to be a competing business this person was trying to grow without realizing who the people were that were in the Uber with them. So it was quite the funny conversation. But we won't go down that road right now. What I do want to just ask you, though, are 4 fun questions, my favorite questions of any podcast interview, and I think it says a lot about a person. So I want to know, first of all, Rudy, what's your favorite book for us to add to our accelerator book list?
Sam, I'm 54 years old. So there aren't any newer books that I would recommend because
give us a golden oldie. We don't need anything
all
new.
The newer books are based on the older books.
Rewritten.
Yeah, well, actually, they're all based on the Bible. If you really go down to it, you want personal development. But when I joined this business, the books that made the biggest difference to me, and I think they're still somewhere in print: The Magic of Believing, The Magic of Thinking Big. Those were 2 big books.
Magic of Believing and The Magic of Thinking Big.
That made awesome. I don't know why they made a big difference to me. And then there were others, but not as significant, like Acres of Diamonds, right? That convinced me that it didn't matter that I was a farm boy and where I was, but I could do it too. There were a lot of books like that, and I don't know how spiritual allowed to be, but the Bible has been a big thing to me. Because you said before something to me about you've had all these opportunities that were fearful, but yet you took them. And I do that because I believe that when we pray, God always answers our prayers, but not the way we want him to necessarily. There's always 3 answers: 1, yes, here you can have it; or 2, not yet, you're not ready for it yet, give it some time; or number 3 is, nah, you don't want that, I got something better for you. And it always reminds me, have you ever heard that country song by Garth Brooks that says, thank God for unanswered prayers?
Yes.
It's a great country song, and that's the foundation of it.
Yeah. So. Yep. Awesome. And Rudy, if you could have one superpower, what would that be and why?
I don't know if this is a superpower or not. But again, I'd want to talk to God.
Well, I don't think it's a superpower, but I think it's a good one. But mind you can already.
No, but I mean, I would
how
like
would you change it?
I would like to face with, say,
You wanna have like a physical
Yeah,
conversation
I
with
got
him
some
face to
questions
face.
for you.
Yeah.
I have
And I
faith,
want to hear the
but
answers straight away. Yeah, I reckon you and the rest of the world, me too. I think the question actually, and we should add a question into this, is if you did get an audience with God, what would be one question you'd ask? We get all sorts of very interesting questions coming up.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of questions I'd have.
Yeah.
A lot of questions.
um, Rudy, what's your favorite quote?
I said it before. It changed my life. Well, I'll give you two because I think they were
Mm,
very important to me. One was Jim Rohn's: "For things to change, you have to change, and for things to get better, you have to get better."
yep.
And that wasn't just in the early days. I asked myself that every time I went somewhere. Look, why am I not? I'm here. I'm in Germany. Oh no, what am I going to do now? Well, for
Yep.
things to change, you got to change because nobody around you is going to get better unless you get better. You know, I go to Canada. The business is devastated. Now what do I do? Well, I had to change me. And once I took that on me, for me to change, what am I going to do about the situation? Things started to get better. You know, in our
Yep.
business, we often have leaders and they look at a company and say, what's the company going to do about this? What's the company going to do about that? There's only so much the company can do about those things. What are you going to do about it? What can you do to change the situation for yourself?
Yep.
And the second quote that I think made a huge difference for me, and maybe I'm over talking to you, but I was convinced, and I don't remember if it was Jim. I don't think it was. It was someone else I was complaining about something. This goes way in the early days. And then I saw this quote, and it said, "I felt sorry for myself for I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet." And I wrote that on a 3x5 card, and I swear I carried that around in my back pocket for years. And every time
Yep.
things were going bad and I'd feel sorry for myself, I'd pull that card out and I'd say to myself, Rudy, look at the things that you got.
Yeah.
Where are you now compared to where you were when you were a farm boy? What have you been able to do for your mom and dad? What's the family like? I'd write down, I'd start with 5 things that are positive, and it would turn my
Yep.
mind.
So you were gratitude journaling before gratitude journaling was cool too.
Oh, yeah. Is that what you call it now? Maybe I'm behind.
We call it gratitude journaling. It's starting every day and writing down some things that you're grateful for. And actually, my mentor, when I first stepped into business, gave me a plaque, which is still on the wall in my kitchen now. And it says, when you're grateful for what you have everything that you need. And yeah, it's down that road. I think that's so valuable. I remind myself and my kids of it every day when, and we all go into that place where we start going, oh, why isn't this happening? Or why don't I have this? Or why don't I have that? And it's that reminder. And, we've had to do this just recently. We had a little bit of a very last minute opportunity to buy a house that would have been our absolute dream home. The house had been on the market for 6 months, and we'd only just found it. It hadn't had an offer. It hadn't sold. And so we found it. We thought this is meant to be. And so, very, very off the cuff and last minute, we go and put an offer in, speaking to our accountant, trying to figure all this out. We thought this must be, from God. This is meant to be. This is a very, it's so out of the blue. It just, and so I started to get my heart set on it. And so we quickly called someone in to list our own home and put the offer in, knowing it would get accepted because the real estate agent told us what we needed to offer. And he rings us back and he says, the owners said the offer was great, but they've decided to pull it off the market.
Oh, no.
And I was like, you're kidding me, and this is happening as we've got, painters coming in to paint the house, someone coming in to fix the roof. We've got all these things happening around us. And I'm going, how are you serious? And so, I even went to the lengths of trying to contact the owner of the home and try and convince them to sell us their home. And I got really grumpy about it. And I realized something. I needed that to happen in order for me to get back to being grateful for the house that I had.
Great.
And so now I walk in and I'm like, I'm going to remind myself of how lucky I am to be in this home before I'm going to be blessed with another one.
Good for you.
Because we're always looking for the next thing, right? We get so focused on what we want now. You know, that time you bought that new outfit, you loved it so much and you put it on and you felt great, but now you're looking at it as dirty old rags because you're focused on the next thing, and that was only a week ago. And I think we all do it. It's human nature, right?
I'm going to ask you, Sam, a year from now, when we talk sometime, what new house are you in? Because you know what?
I know.
That's one of the number threes. God said, nope, not this one. I got something better for you.
And this is the thing, Greg and I both, and it's interesting this has come up. We are probably going to talk and I'll be like, Rudy, you're never going to believe what happened. Mm-hmm. It has been the most bizarre scenario, but conversation for another day. And we literally wake up every day right now going, I wonder what will happen today. Because we know there's stuff going on here, but you know, we do wake up and we go, we love our home. We're grateful for our home. And for as long as that needs to be our home, we're going to be grateful for it, because once upon a time it was our dream home, right? But you forget that. You start looking at all the things that are wrong with it, that aren't right. But back when we moved in, we didn't notice any of those things. We saw all the things we loved. Rudy, last question. But my favorite, if you could go back in time and say one thing to your past self, what would that be?
One thing in my past self, what would I say?
Yeah, and it can't be buy shares in Zoom.
No. Yeah, or Google or Apple or... No, I would... I don't know. I really don't know what would I say to myself if I go back in time, other than what I already know, and that is to continue to say, work on you harder than you're working. Don't let the problems get you. Work harder on yourself. And like everybody else, I'm telling you, I had lots of years of being down. And in those down times, I wish I would have known where I'd be today. That would be great, because then you wouldn't be as down. So, yeah, Sam, I'd probably say what I'd say to myself is, hey, again, go back to the blessings. Look where you are, not where it is.
Yeah.
Look where it's going to be.
I love that. Awesome. Well, Rudy, look, it has been such an honor and a privilege to have you join me today. I know we talked for a lot longer than I anticipated, but I knew that was going to happen because you've got quite the story. Thank you for honoring us with your time. And most importantly, thank you for being such a big advocate and so passionately supporting this amazing industry that we have and all of those lives that get changed every day through this industry. So we appreciate you, and thank you, Rudy.
Thank you. And by the way, thanks for what you do, putting out these podcasts and keeping people involved, getting this information. One more second. In these events, the reason I say they're so important, involvement equals success, is because there might only be one little nugget that you get out of it. And that's why I'm always happy to do these things, or even go in front of the room. I don't care if people listen to me for an hour. They might have gotten one nugget that made a difference from them, like it was for me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You never know.
So true.
Thanks for
so true. And that's what we're here for, is the golden nuggets, for sure. Yeah. So thanks again, Rudy. We appreciate you. And thanks, of course, to our beautiful listeners for tuning in again this week. We love having you and we love being a part of your world. And please don't forget to share this episode if it's spoken to you and you feel like it might impact somebody else in the business or someone who's thinking of being in the business. But we'll see you again on the podcast next week. Thanks, everyone, and bye for now. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. If you love listening and you found that this was helpful for your direct selling business, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out the recommended video that's popped up on your screen right here. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.